Okay, so thank you everybody for your patience there, and welcome to today's webinar. In this 30-minute panel discussion, our experts will show you simple, actionable steps that will improve the relevancy of your local marketing campaigns, improving effectiveness and driving results that you and your local partners will be able to measure. So at the end of the 30-minute session, we'll finish with a 15-minute Q&A, and all attendees will be supplied with a simple framework for improving relevancy in their own local marketing activities. Any questions you do have can be entered in the Q&A box that's on the right-hand side of the Teams window. We will, of course, answer as many as we can, but if we don't get to yours, we'll follow up after the webinar. So on today's webinar, I'm delighted to introduce you to the panel. We have myself, Peter Cronin, Managing Director of We Are Acuity. We have Claire Cardozi, Head of Digital Decisioning at London North Eastern Railway, that was formerly Virgin Trains, and Martin Watts, a very good friend of Acuity and a performance marketing expert. We will take a section each during the webinar, and then we'll come together at the end for the Q&A. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Claire.
Thank you, Peter. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the first section of today's webinar is knowing your audience. So to deliver marketing relevancy, you need to know who you're speaking to and why, so you can find them and you can tailor your message to them. It's all about thinking like a human. What am I trying to do and why? Who am I trying to contact and what would I like to tell them? So before you jump into thinking about who you want to speak to and what you want to tell them, let's first of all take a step away from the customer and focus on the business that you work for. So if customers were doing something differently that was being driven by your marketing, what would this look like and what would it mean for your business? So for example, what targets are you trying to hit that marketing could improve to drive you forward? What signs of improvement would you like to see for your business health? What results would be being delivered? What key performance indicators have you set yourself for this year that marketing could help you with? Is it about achieving a sales volume or revenue? Or is it about achieving the same results, but with a lower cost base and a lower investment? Spending some time, first of all, thinking about what do you want to see and why, and what will give you the confidence that the activity you're doing in your marketing is working and making a difference to your business. Once you've taken that first step of understanding what am I trying to achieve and what does success look like, you can then start to focus on your customers. So taking the next step to look at your business through the eyes of a customer. You can see here on screen a model that shows a customer journey and life cycle. So right from the very beginning, what's the customer need that they've got, the reason that you can attract them into your product, your service? Where will they be when they're researching? How will they then select your product, your service, your brand? And what does that purchase process look like? Then receiving that product or service, using it, and then hopefully keeping them loyal and turning them into a repeat customer. So if I look at this through the eyes of a train brand that I work for at the moment, I see this in two parts. One being the physical journey. So someone is buying a train ticket to take a train journey. So there are moments when we can inspire them for a reason to travel, a reason to come and look at tickets, look at destinations and to buy. And then that physical train journey experience, the day that they're traveling, that they're engaging with our brand, and then the time afterwards when we can understand how their journey's been and encourage them to book another journey. Taking a step back, I then think about the overall life cycle. So a customer only enters into your brand once for the very first time. So they can be researching multiple times, but that one very first time that they come in as a brand new customer, and then hopefully they'll be purchasing numerous times with you, and it's about maintaining that longer life cycle. So the two pictures being the journey of the experience with your brand, and then the long-term life cycle, which is brought together here in this diagram. So moving on to the next slide, looking at that specifically for your business, where within that customer journey and that customer life cycle do you want to drive the biggest change to achieve your KPIs and success for your business? So for example, if you know that you've got a limited customer base that you're talking to at the moment and is purchasing with you, perhaps you'll spend more of your time at the front end of the journey, which is how can I attract more new customers to my brand through marketing? Or it may be that you've got a really comprehensive database of customers already, or people who historically bought with you, in my world, travelled with me. Perhaps it's more about going after those existing customers or customers that have possibly lapsed and trying to reignite them into customers. Or perhaps it's about customers who've just travelled, in my world, or just bought from you, but perhaps you know they've not had the optimum performance, and it's perhaps about recovering that opportunity and saving them as a customer. So spending some time to look through the whole customer life cycle, where have you got the opportunity to drive change that's going to match up to your business KPIs and what you're trying to achieve? So one example may be if I've got a low cost budget, but I know I want to try and attract as many new people as possible. Perhaps if you have a loyal base, is it about utilising your marketing activity to encourage someone to refer a friend and to reward them for that, so that you can then open up the number of customers that you've got to be able to talk to? So to recap on the selecting your audience before we move on to the targeting stage, first of all, taking a step back and thinking, what does success look like for my business? What are the key performance indicators that I would like to make a difference in? And then look at the customer journey and the customer life cycle and identify where are the opportunities where you could drive change through marketing that would help you achieve those business goals and business KPIs. I'll now hand over to Martin, who's going to take you through the targeting section, which will help you with identifying who you want to speak to and what you want to tell them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. So reaching the right audiences on and offline actually can be deceptively simple. Many platforms will quite happily take your money in return for firing out ads to a whole bunch of irrelevant users. So Facebook boost button, I'm looking at you when I say that, really. So we've developed a very simple 5-step process really to finding and reaching your perfect customers. So the first step being targeting, second step being hypothesize, third step test and learn, step 4 scaling, and step 5 reviewing and repeating. So let's take a look at step 1. That being targeting. So as Claire's mentioned, identifying the key audiences for your business and trying to be as specific as possible is where we all need to start. Developing personas for each of those and keeping that whole life cycle in mind. Sounds very simple, right? But as we know, we've probably all had to sit down and do this. And whilst we might be able to do some fairly generic personas, trying to get into the detail of what motivates our potential customers and how do we segment them online, how do we find them online, it can get quite tricky. So we do have some tools that we can use to help us develop these personas. So the first one of those being Google. It's free and it's full of useful insights into how your customers search for your products and services. So the first one being Google Suggest, which is on the left, and that can show you what searchers are looking for around the search term that you enter. So here we've got an example. One of our clients is a reusable water bottle company. They sell stainless steel insulated water bottles. And we can see here that 2 important factors for customers when they're searching for this are going to be leaking. We've got towards the bottom there, and also making sure they're cost effective being the second ones, people searching for cheap reusable water bottles. So already we've got 2 factors that we can put into our campaign. Further down the page on Google, you've also got what other people have searched for, or what other people have asked, should I say. And again, that's related to the query that you enter in at the top, and it's giving us more and more valuable information about how they're searching, what questions they've got when they're researching our products. But the good news is you don't have to do endless amounts of Google searches for this. There are 2 tools that we can use to kind of scrape all this data from Google for us. The first one is Answer the Public. Similar to how you use Google, you put in your term and it will spit out all of the various different things that Google Suggest does. So again, that's a gold mine of information. Second one is similar, but it scrapes that also asked box. So again, we put in reusable water bottles here, and we got a whole host of different questions, some of which can be used for our targeting, some of which are, if you look on the left hand side, are great for using within your content marketing because they're questions that need answering, and why can't you write a blog to answer those? Another great place is actually Google Analytics. So I would have thought most of you have Google Analytics installed on your websites already. If you go into the demographic section under audience, you might have to switch on sharing information with the Google Display Network to get access to this. But what it can give you is demographic information. So it will tell you the ages of the people visiting your website. Now, this is either through explicit information that people have told Google, or it's implicit by their browsing behavior. Google kind of makes some assumptions about their age. And similarly, you've got the gender as well, whether it's whether they're male or female browsing your site. Another section of analytics is the demographic and interest data here, where we've got affinity categories, which is they're the broadest, I suppose, the broadest way of targeting people through the Google Display Network. But here, what it's doing is it's saying the people that are browsing your site are put into these broad affinity categories on the Google Display Network. And then again, on the right hand side, we've got in-market segments, which are further down that buying funnel. So they're a bit more specific, but it's saying they're in the market for all of these different things. So again, what we can determine from that is, okay, well, they're interested in our product and service, but what else are they struggling with? What else are they looking into? And we can gain a very valuable insights into that through that section. You've also got your own CRM data. So with the right GDPR permissions, you can of course upload those into various different advertising platforms to build lookalike audiences from. So instead of just uploading them all in one go, there's two different ways we could split this. You could say, I'm going to split my data into high value and low value customers. I'm also going to split it into long-term versus short-term customers, because potentially I want to spend more of my marketing budget targeting a longer-term customer than a shorter-term customer. And then you've also got the remarketing pixels that you can place on your website, where I've shown you an example here coming up for Facebook and LinkedIn. So the Facebook pixel can pull out what other pages, broadly, what other page categories they're interested in. And then on the right hand side, we've also got what specific pages they also follow. So again, it's giving us more and more information on our current website visitors and customers. And then similar to Facebook, LinkedIn, but it's more of a business focus. So the LinkedIn audience insights can pull out what industry they're in, what job levels they're at. There's loads and loads of good information in there that you can have a look at. And then finally, you've also got your email list. Quite often overlooked and probably more important than ever in the age of all these cookies disappearing. This is your first party data. This is the data that you own. So why not send them an email and ask them? Here, I've got an example here from Slack where I quite liked, because they actually said how long it was going to take me to fill the form in, which is, for me, it makes me more likely to fill it in. So pulling all of that targeting information together, what we've tried to do here is, again, for this water bottle company, is pulled it through into two different types of customers, really. One we've called young active individuals, and the other was eco shoppers. So what we try to do is split it between three different areas. So demographics, psychographics, and behavioral. So demographics being, the things that you can't change about yourself, how old I am, whether I'm male or female, whether I'm a parent or not in this case. Psychographic is more, why would I want to buy, or why am I looking for this? Why would I want to buy from you? What's my problem, kind of thing. Where for the water bottle company here, we had a younger audience was more interested in having a unique product, so custom designs, maybe stenciling their name on it, having fancy colors, that kind of stuff. Whereas the eco shopper, they just wanted to reduce their plastic, and they were favoring quality really over the longevity. Quality and longevity over the price. And then we've got behavioral as well. So what kinds of behaviors can we use to target these individuals on the different advertising platforms? So, for example, our young active individuals, we found from our research that they were interested in running or walking. They have an active lifestyle. So we can target all of those things as interests, and similar for the eco shoppers as well. Step 2 is about hypothesizing. So we've come up with these avatars of our customers, but there at the moment it's based on research, but it is assumptions. So we need to test some of these assumptions and test some of this research. So we have given some examples of some tests here. So perhaps test 1 might be, our audience will respond better to group imagery than solo imagery, so people on their own in a photograph. Or perhaps test number 5 on this list is a geographic one. So we think people in the southeast will convert at a higher rate than the southwest. So all you need to do is sit down, brainstorm a few of these, get yourself a list, and then start prioritizing them. Which brings us on to step 3, which is testing and learning. Now, when we run campaigns for clients, we're always running tests, but we'll typically run 1 to 2 tests for about 1 to 2 weeks each, with a small level of spend. Once we know the biggest levers that we need to pull, for example, which audience and messaging combination works best, then we can put the majority of the campaign budget behind it, and that goes into step 4, into the scaling there, you can see on the graphic. This way, what we're doing is we're being as efficient as we can with our budgets, and we're never spending large amounts of money on just hunches or assumptions at the beginning of a campaign. Then as we are scaling that campaign through the winners of like test 1 and test 2, we're still carrying on testing. So we might be refining test 1 and test 2, or we might be testing completely new things, but what we're constantly doing is learning and evolving the campaigns. And when we find what works within those subsequent tests, we're rolling those winners up into our main budget campaign for scaling. Case study of this actually in action. We wanted to find out with our client Motability what's made the biggest difference. So they were posting DMs and they were sending emails, but does doing any of those things individually or together make a difference? And what we tested was direct mail only, direct mail and email only. And what we found is that when we sent the direct mail a week before the email landed, we had a 200% better open rate than the other 2 on test, and we had a 42% higher response rate than the other options as well. So it shows that doing testing to challenge assumptions and challenge the status quo is definitely worthwhile doing. Step 4 is about scaling. So this is where we're moving our test winners into the main campaign with the largest portion of the overall budget. And it's a good idea to keep your audiences and interests split out here as much as you possibly can, because over time, the creative and the audiences get tired, and you may want to sort of dial up spend on one group or dial it down on another. And it's a lot easier to do that when you split it out and segmented it well, rather than having everything lumped into one campaign. It just, as I say, it just makes everything a lot easier to manage. We can also implement some kind of automated rules here as well in the scaling section to help boost the best performing ones and reduce spend on the poorer performing ones. And that just removes the need for us to be checking our campaigns 24/7, because, you know, who wants to be doing that 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, tweaking spends? Nobody does. So we've got some examples of rules that we typically run on client campaigns. This one is an example of if you're an e-commerce brand or you have a clear value for a business action, like a lead or an appointment booked, for example. So if you know the monetary value behind something, then this one is a great rule. So what we can say here is, if over the last 7 days, the return on the ad spend is more than 3, or that's 300%, then what we're going to do is increase our audience budget for that one by 5%. So again, that's a lot easier when you have a monetary value, because you can say, I spent £100 on advertising, but I made £500. Great, let's increase that budget by 5%. And then the opposite to that one is obviously scaling campaigns back. So if the 7-day cost per action is more than £5 in this case, then let's decrease that audience budget by 5%. So again, this cost per action could be anything. It could be cost per lead, it could be cost per form submission, it could be cost per PDF download, whatever it is that you're tracking. You can use these automated rules to scale up and scale down spends. And then step 5 is all about reviewing and repeating. This is a case where we, you know, go round and round and round with our campaigns and just manage them really. So firstly, you need to be checking things daily to begin with, at least, especially if you have those automated rules running, because they can, if you have a rule that increases spend by 5% every single day, you can see how quite quickly that's going to run away with you if you're not keeping an eye on things. And plan ahead for creative refreshes. So typically creative will last around a month for most campaigns. So do plan in to refresh that creative in advance and perhaps incorporate some of the learnings from previous tests to your next batch of campaign assets. And also don't forget, like, the time of year, the dates and things like that. You can work all of that into your creative. Don't bin the losers from your original tests, because although they were the losing creative, I'm sure they weren't awful. So do keep them on hand, because as your winners start declining in their performance, you can bring in some of those poorer performing ones just to kind of tide you over a little bit. And then finally, data driven and dynamic creative can really help take the load off of you and your creative teams when you're running campaigns, and Peter's going to come on and talk to you a bit more about that now.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Martin. That's very good. So what is the value of creative? Well, as a creative myself, I'm delighted to say its value is having something of a renaissance, really. So as you can see, according to Google Media Labs, 70% of campaign performance can be attributed to the creative. And high quality creative increases ad viewing by nearly 6% and nearly doubles purchase intent against low quality creative. So really good news there. So what exactly is data-driven creative? Well, it's personalised creative based on audience and contextual signals at scale, and it's actually not new. So we've all been doing it for many years across things like TV, press, radio, out of home, direct mail. It was all about getting the message in front of your audience at the right time. So what's happened now? What are the new things that are happening? Well, data-driven dynamic creative is the new thing, and that means it's become dynamic, really, and that's due to a host of new channels that have now become available. So for example, TV, audience targeting, digital display, connected radio, digital out of home. The difference now is that we're able to do this in real time and at scale. So what is the secret of managing this new dynamic approach to creative? Well, we believe it's all about having a template strategy that sits behind the creative work that you're doing. So what are the benefits of that? So from a cost perspective, there can be a reduction in production costs, better utilisation of those expensive assets that you've got sitting there. It allows you, as Martin said, to have cross-channel deployment and opportunities for automation as well. Then from a speed perspective, it can lead to faster campaign turnaround because you've got a lot of the basics are set up and in place. You've potentially got a simpler approval process. All of your materials are reusable and adaptable, and you can create real-time updates when campaigns are live. And last but not least, your return on investment. Well, the whole thing about this is increasing that creative relevance, the ability to create more variants, and having the ability to get creative reporting and analytics, and the ultimate goal is dynamic creative optimization, so it's all happening in real time and in flight. So what is the anatomy of a template? Well, you know, all of you will be familiar with brands and brand guidelines. So often within a brand, you've got fixed elements. So your headline and your brand position, your fonts and your imagery. But if we strip that away for now and look at it as a template, you've often underlying that got flexibility around the headline and the body copy, flexibility around your prices, retailer details, terms and conditions, flexibility around your call to action, and again, flexibility around imagery too. So how might that manifest itself? Well, it's all about making your creative more valuable to the viewer. In its simplest terms, a template can be made more relevant using just simple contextual data like localized relevancy, you know, that can go into the headline, localized relevancy around offers or retailer information as well. But when it gets onto the next level, the relevancy increases the more we understand the viewer and their needs. So things like a personalized relevancy around the headline, the imagery and the copy, and personalized relevance around the customer, their context, their price, their offer, specific products, location, retailer, call to actions. All of these things really do add value to the viewer while they are blissfully unaware of what's going on behind the scenes. So how would you run managed campaigns for your network, assuming that you're going out through lots of different outlets? Well, there's a number of different things that you can be looking at, really. So from an audience perspective, you could be looking at your CRM data, as Martin was saying. You can also be looking at site analytics and third-party data as well, of course. Then as far as targeting, there's things around contextual, geographic and demographic. And finally, simple things like the environmental factors. So what time of day is it? What's the weather like? How near are they to your store or outlet? All of these are things that can feed in valuable data that can improve the relevancy of your creative. So what exactly does that look like in real life, really? So we've got some real life examples of some work that we've been doing recently. So from a dynamic digital display perspective, by building things based on a template that's driven by data, you have access to automation, you're allowed to, or you're able to get dynamic creative optimization and those in-flight updates. And this has become much more accessible now with thanks to things like Google's Ad Canvas. Then moving on to email. Well, if you move to a modular template-based email build, again, it gives you a much more flexible contact strategy so that you can start to message what the customer wants and when they want it. And again, you can start to bake in automation. And this again has become very much more accessible with software like Click Dimensions, for example. And then even print. So, you know, this isn't something that just happens in the online world. It can happen offline as well. So again, dynamic print gives you a much more flexible contact strategy with variable data output and automation. And things like XMPie have been doing this for a long time. And then dynamic social. So again, relevant, high quality content, tailored social messages, on brand, but localized at scale. And systems like DriftRock can help with this kind of thing. And then dynamic video. Everybody loves video and everybody knows the value of it these days. So relevant, high quality content with tailored video messages, custom on-air graphics. And again, you can really use this in a multitude of different channels. So systems like Data Clay, really helpful in making this available to you. And what about if you don't have the opportunity to manage these kind of campaigns on behalf of your network? Well, in a situation like that, you're really looking at a distributed approach, and something called marketing asset management is really useful for you at this kind of stage. So what it is, it's a local marketing portal where you can set up all of the campaigns using your own brand guidelines and create brand-driven data or data-driven brand campaigns on behalf of your retailers. So a system like this will give your retailers access to multi-channel, multi-format materials, all data-driven, flexible templates, and it's an engaging platform where they can all log in and have access to this sort of stuff. Within that as well, you can give them access to media buying and planning, so they have an understanding of what you're doing at a national level so that they can work alongside that at local level. And you can build in things like co-funding, whereby you can put budgets towards their own local marketing campaigns. And last but not least, of course, you get analytics built into that as well. So everybody knows exactly what's happening, not just with the marketing, but how your retailers are performing and what stuff they're doing. It can be integrated through single sign-on into your own systems that you have as a brand. It's efficient, reduces a lot of costs, and it's compliant as well, and follows best practice too. So systems like Brand Muscle are available for that kind of thing. So that concludes where we've got to so far today. So in summary, what exactly have we seen? Well, our aim really was to get you thinking about the wealth of opportunities that are out there to really improve your local marketing. And it's an approach that will work in any sector. So firstly, know and select your audience. So as Claire said, think like a human, decide what you want to achieve and why, work out who to contact and what you'd like to tell them, and set those KPIs. Then when it comes to finding and targeting the right customers, create personas, as Martin said, of your target audience, find out where they are, and then develop that hypothesis and test it some more, and then scale and test again. And finally, to supercharge your campaign creative, implement a template strategy. Decide upon what dynamic or variable elements you want within your creative, and consider using cross-channel optimization. And ultimately, we're looking towards practicing creative optimization. So we've covered a lot of bases here. We've tried to keep it as simple as we can. From my perspective, my tip for the day would be to start small, keep it simple, test and scale. So Claire and Martin, what would be your nugget for today? Claire, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I think my nugget for today would be, as you progress through those exciting stages of making your decisions about targeting, designing the creative and getting into the testing phase, keep thinking back to what is it I'm trying to achieve? What KPI am I trying to make a difference in? And use that to guide every decision you're making throughout the targeting and creative process.
Excellent, thank you, Claire. And Martin?
I think going back to what I was mentioning around testing, really, I've seen so many clients, they like the idea of testing, but what they do is they bring their own opinions and I suppose like their own biases to the results of each test and almost throw out the results of the test. So my tip is follow the data and trust that data from your tests and move that forward rather than your own thoughts and bias.
Fantastic, thank you, Martin. So we've had a whole load of questions in. Okay, let me pick this one out first. So running multiple campaigns for multiple businesses sounds really complicated and time consuming. How do you manage that? Martin, shall I throw this one to you first?
Yeah, so multiple businesses. So it's usually, I'm assuming that question is going to be around multiple businesses of the same franchise, so yes, assuming it's like a car dealer or something similar like that.
Yeah.
So I think, as you mentioned, Peter, there's a tool called DriftRock which can really help with that. That can help with the setup, and there is another tool that can help with the creative optimization, which I think you mentioned as well, which can help pull together multiple creative versions based on data. So yes, it's complicated. And for a few, it can be time consuming, but when you actually scale it up to like 150 or 300 plus locations, then no, it's not time consuming. You're saving yourselves hours and hours of time, both in studio and in, manual setups. So yeah.
So you're not spending your Saturday nights constantly optimizing.
No.
That's something of a relief then. So, I mean, I've got a little bit of perspective to kind of add on to this really. So Google, for example, has something called the Creative Maturity Framework. And really that has 4 stages about this kind of shift towards improving relevancy. So their 4 stages are nascent, emerging, developed and advanced. Of course, that relates to online activity, but there's also parallels with offline too, really. So we like to see that as a full 360. So we wouldn't expect everyone to jump straight to the advanced stage overnight. But there is the ability to progress gradually whilst testing and learning, as Martin said, as you go. So we find a lot of companies that we talk to, they say, yeah, we're doing that already. But when we actually drill into it, they're really at that nascent stage. So they might be doing a bit of always on activity, maybe a couple of creative options and a bit of remarketing. But as hopefully we've shown you today, the opportunities are far greater than that. So the emerging stage brings more creative opportunities, more rich media, it opens up engagement metrics and much more advanced audience segmentation. So that's the next stage. But after that, you would move on to their developed stage where you can really start to make the most of your first party data, which, as Claire and Martin said, is absolutely crucial. So you start to add in more creative components. And you can start benefiting from those contextual signals too. And that's when things get really exciting. So we've tried to focus today around the opportunities of getting to the emerging and the developed phases within your local marketing. And after that, you move into advanced, and that's really where you start to massively take advantage of automation, machine learning and bespoke builds. But that's for another day. I think at the moment, it's about picking a couple of campaigns, as Claire said, starting small, test and learn, scaling and starting to build this up for yourself and for your own business. So hopefully that's answered that question. I've noticed there's another one that's come in here. Do you have any tips for how to set KPIs around your local marketing? What might they look like? Claire, do you fancy having a go at this one?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think if you're looking at the KPIs you want to set for the marketing campaigns that you're going to be testing, if you followed the process that we've talked you through today, which is starting with what change are you trying to achieve, designing the targeting and the creative with that in mind, that process should take you to a place where it's quite clear about what difference you're trying to drive and therefore what you should see in your marketing. So for example, if you've decided you want to focus on attracting more people into your brand, one of the key things that you want to see is people engaging with your marketing activity, be that click-throughs to your website, for example, and then seeing those people landing on your site and using the Google Analytics or whichever analytics site that you're using throughout your website to see what are those people doing when they're arriving. So if that's what you're looking at in terms of right at the front end of the funnel of attracting people in, or perhaps you're focused on a challenge that you've got at the moment. So for example, in my world of trains, it might be if we've got a destination along our route that we've not got as many people travelling to. So let's say, for example, we decide to do a campaign inspiring people to travel to York. We would be looking very specifically at how our marketing activity is driving people through to our booking engine and buying tickets specifically for York. So it's about being able to hone in on what KPI you're trying to move, how you've then designed your targeting and creative to follow that, and following, as Martin said, follow the data all the way through as to what difference do you need to see at the other end that's a hard fact in the data that you can see that your marketing activity has driven a change in behaviour.
Fantastic. Martin, would you like to add anything?
I mean, no, Claire's covered most of that, I think. But in terms of like how we keep an eye on those and how do you measure them, I guess two tools are going to be your savior. One is Google Analytics, as Claire said. My advice would be to try and make that your source of truth. Try and push as much data as you can into that, because that can almost deduplicate all the conversions you might be seeing across the multiple platforms. And also Google Tag Manager is probably another one to get. If you haven't got that installed, get that installed by your dev team, because as marketers, it can mean that we can do a lot more with your website than if you have to go back to developers to get things changed. For example, you might want to track new conversions. You put a new page live on your site and that's not tracked natively. If you have Google Tag Manager, you can add some tracking to that page quite easily. So I'd say those two tools probably help you track your KPIs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. And there's one more question here. We're doing quite well time-wise. We've got another 5 minutes, so I think we'll pick this last one. So doesn't a template strategy inhibit your creative options? So I've got to jump in on this one really, because this is something I get quite excited about actually after many years of working on templates. Really, I actually think that this improves creativity. It does challenge the creative teams and gets them to think differently, but it stops laziness really. And you've got to remember that the template itself is actually kind of like a hidden sort of foundation that sits underneath the creative. When you come and look at a house, you're not really worried about the foundations because they all look the same, but you have the ability to build on top of that and create something very clever and very exciting. So I absolutely don't think it inhibits creativity, and in fact it drives it along further. Claire, what about you, your experience there?
I totally agree. From a client side perspective, I think one of the first things it does is it takes out the debate and enables you to have consistent elements, which means that you've got a really consistent look and feel as to how you're presenting your brand. And I think especially if you're working perhaps with different agencies across different channels that you're using, it straight away takes that debate away and makes sure you're being consistent about how your brand is being positioned. I also think it challenges people to think more creatively about the testing element, because when you're focusing on the creative, where you've got the space to make a change, your messaging, your call to actions, it gives you the brain space to be able to think more about what things could I test to drive a change here, and focus more of your energy on driving change through what you're putting into your marketing, rather than having to start at the drawing board every single time.
Fantastic. Good. Thank you, Claire. Always good when a client agrees with what the agency says as well. So really, really good news. So, well, this has taken us to our 42 minutes so far. So it looks like we'll be ending on time. So thank you to everybody, particularly Martin and Claire for joining us today, as well as the Acuity production team behind the scenes in helping everything to go seamlessly. This was our first go at a webinar on Teams. We've previously done them on another platform, but it seems to have performed effortlessly. So a big thumbs up to Microsoft for helping us with that. Everybody who attended today will drop you a note letting you know when the recording is available, and you'll be free obviously to share that with friends and colleagues who you think might be interested. There also will be a download, which is a little kind of framework that might help you bring some of this thinking into your own marketing campaigns. And obviously it's just a starting point for you really to adapt and make it suit your own particular needs. So we'll get that across to you, and that hopefully will help you with some of your own projects in the future. One other last thing was just to ask for is we'll be sending out a little survey to everybody. If you do have a chance, it will take about 5 minutes to fill out, and it will just give us a little bit of feedback and guidance on what we want to do for our next webinars, because webinars are an ongoing thing for Acuity. There's lots of the ones that we've done previously on our website, so I'd encourage people to go and have a look. Yeah, with no further ado, thank you all very much. I hope you have a safe and productive day. Thank you.